I'm Sally Aitken, Associate Dean Research in the faculty, and it's my pleasure to moderate today's seminar. So it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Paolo Cherubini for today's seminar. And Dr. Cherubini has a wide-ranging interest in tree physiology, forest ecology, and evolution, and how these areas relate to management of natural resources and forests in particular. And he uses dendrochronology, dendroecology, and ecophysiology to get at relevant questions. And I'm very happy to see members of Dr. Laurie Daniels' Tree Ring Lab here today, who also work on questions around using dendroecology. So Dr. Cherubini is senior scientist in the Dendrosciences group at the WSL Swiss Federal Institute for Forest, Snow, and Landscape Research in Switzerland. And he's also an adjunct professor in our Department of Forest and Conservation Sciences here at UBC. He holds other appointments at universities, including at the Lamont Doherty Earth Observation Center at Columbia University. And, one of the tough things faculty members are expected to do is serve as reviewers and as editors or associate editors of journals and for papers in journals. And it's remarkable how much work Dr. Cherubini's done in this regard. He was the editor of the tree ring journal Dendrochronology from 2002 for 20 years, 2003 to 2022. So that's remarkable. That's a huge amount of work. I don't know how you've been so productive in the meantime, and also served as associate member for a number of other journals. So he puts people like me to shame who don't do enough of that kind of work. Anyways, it's a great pleasure to introduce Dr. Cherubini, who will be talking today about the origins of Stradivari's Messiah violin and uncovering some of the mysteries around that violin. So.
Thank you very much for this very nice, too nice probably, introduction.
Recording. Hopefully we find one. So, I mean, we found dolphins. So
today I will welcome to this seminar. Thank you very much for the introduction and for inviting me. It's my pleasure to be here today to tell you the story of the Messiah violin and the controversial dating of the Messiah violin. Is it fine here for the camera? Yeah, good. First of all, okay. So next slide then, please. I can't do myself because it was working before. But now, okay. Anyway, then I will tell you next slide, please. The value of works of art obviously depends on several different cultural values and also mainly on the fact if a work of art is authentical or not. Although there are also examples like the Salvator Mundi, which is the most expensive work of art ever sold for 450 millions. It was sold to to sultans, and it was bought actually, although Salvator Mundi was probably of this work of art, only 20% is still really Leonardo da Vinci, because it was restored by a French restore studio shop, and so it is probably not really authentical. But anyway, that was also a competition between Emirates, and then they decided to buy, instead of a yacht, they bought the Leonardo da Vinci. So there are several different reasons for for the value of a work of art. The first studies, dendrochronological studies, to assess the authenticity of paintings, they were done by Bauch, Eckstein in Hamburg, in Germany, and they were published in the 70s, last century, and the most important were on Rembrandt, where basically they took the wooden panels of Rembrandt, and they, next slide please, doing the cross dating, which you know in the lab of Laurie Daniels, doing, next one please. Yeah, you can gradually now add the curves. You see that matching the ring width series, you see that you can find, for example, here, a very narrow ring, and so you cross date and you assess what? The last ring, when it was formed. Next one. Also next one. Yeah, and so you have a long chronology, and using such chronology, you can also date works of art, or you can also, very famous is also the reconstruction of climate in the past. Next slide, please. Violins, fine violins are also very expensive. I read in the newspaper last week that next June, Stradivari, Leonardo da Vinci, no, Da Vinci ex Scheiden, a violin will be sold at Tarisio, which is an auction house specialized in violins. Until now, the most expensive ever sold violin was the Vieux-Temp made by Guarneri del Gesù, not Stradivari, but Guarneri del Gesù, who was also a very, very famous, not really at that time, but later was becoming very, very famous luthier. Usually, the violins are very, very expensive violins. Nobody would buy a violin for 16 millions like this one, or the Guarneri, or 10 millions and so on. Usually there are foundations, they buy a violin and they give to a famous virtuosos to play maybe the whole life. And then when the violinist, the musician dies, then it goes back to the foundation. Next one, please. That's a very interesting story, because there are several blind tests showing that actually even expert musicians, they are not able to distinguish seemingly between very old classical instruments and modern instruments. But when I was trying to write a literature review on this topic, I contacted also Berliner Philharmoniker, who is playing viola in the Berliner Philharmoniker, and he told me, well, there must be a reason if for centuries all the famous virtuosos would like to play old Northern Italian school violin. Next one. And also, if you think at the cannone, which is this violin played by Niccolò Paganini, there must be a reason if all these very famous musicians want to play classical instruments. You see here the most famous luthiers for the violas were Gasparo da Salò and Giovanni Paolo Maggini. The most famous cello, both from Brescia, and the most famous luthiers for cellos were Goffriller and Montagnana, both from Venice. And you see also, if you look at the ears, that there is a kind of evolution. So the violin is evoluted from the cello and the viola. And Amati was one of the most famous luthiers, and obviously Antonio Stradivari. Stradivari, on Latin, Stradivarius is not wrong to say Stradivarius. It is called also Stradivari. Yeah, next one. Why are these violins so good? There are also many theories and controversial theories, and certainly the old Cremona luthiers, they were making instruments using wood from the northeastern part of the Alps. There are the Dolomites, and they used Norway spruce, Picea abies, usually subalpine Picea abies, so 1,600 meters elevation, 1,700 meters elevation, and what we know is that they used such so-called resonance wood. But a clear definition of the resonance wood doesn't exist. But the wood, in the timber, in the logs, in the forest where it is presumed that Stradivari was taking the wood, is much more expensive, 10 times more expensive than the other wood. So you see, this is from Paneveggio in the Dolomites, where actually I did my PhD, and that's why I started to hear about Stradivari and so on. And you see that this resonance wood has, what else? Different density probably, in comparison with other wood. And also, I will explain better later, also such Hazelwuchs in German, so hazel wood, which is such indented rings. Next one. This is beautiful forest of Paneveggio on the Dolomites, and there are a lot of disturbances. So as you saw, there are also some other features, characteristics in the wood. Next slide, please. For example, such cracks, which are probably induced by summer drought, but they affect only rings which are less dense, probably. You see, you find also in the longitudinal section, these they are filled with resin, so they must be still in the sapwood and not yet. Well, the cadmium was not injured. Next. And there is a mystery also on the methods for achieving the high wood quality by the old luthiers. It's a mystery because this is the forest of Paneveggio, then the wood was floated through rivers in beautiful romantic Venice. Venice with the salty water, was probably salty water leaching the wood, and that's why there is a scientist in Switzerland, close to our institute at the EMPA, who is inducing with fungal decay, inducing less density to the wood. And he claims that his violins are sounding even better than Stradivari. But there are so many different theories, you know, that it's really hard to know if which one is right and which one is also saying true. But certainly this is very, very romantic. And if you think that it's true that from Paneveggio you can, if you float the wood, then it will go to Venice, and then from Venice to Cremona, where you see here is written Antonius Stradivarius Cremonensis facebat anno 1716. Next. Also, the provenance of the wood, Paneveggio. Is it true? There are legends has that Stradivari was going himself in the forest and listening to the logs when they were sliding down on the frozen soil. He was saying, that one, I want this one. But if it's true, it is very beautiful. And again, very romantic, but I don't know if it's true or not. What we should do, and there is no study about, we should go to the Austro-Hungarian Empire in Vienna archives and look if we find some paper where it's written that some wood from Paneveggio was sold to people from Cremona. But there is no study in that sense. Also, the varnish. The varnish, it's also a mystery because I was told by the musician, my friend, that actually nobody could try to make such a beautiful and good sounding varnish as Stradivari and the old master. But still, the recipe of the varnish is not known. And so it's difficult to know if it is true or not that the varnish is so good. Next one. This is the paper published by Francis Schwarze about the wood decay I was telling you before. Next one. There is a very, very nice theory by Henry Grissino Meyer, a friend of mine, who published this paper, very, again, nice, because he's saying trees used by Stradivari to make the violins were growing during the Little Ice Age. And so subalpine forest, Little Ice Age, low temperature, so very small, narrow rings, and also probably less dense because the late wood was thinner and not that wood is also good. So there must be also a reason of Stradivari carving, which was probably better than what I could do, certainly, and also giving a better quality, sound quality. The resonance wood, as I told you before, you see that even already in 1962 or 1935, there were already papers describing this resonance wood. But still, we don't know actually the difference between resonance wood and not resonant wood. The hazelwood, this is a very nice picture. You see these hazelwood in a Norway spruce grown in the eastern Italian Alps. It's also called bear claw due to the wrinkled appearance of the cambium layer that makes the surface of the tree trunk look as though it has been scratched by a bear. And I remember when I was a PhD student, the local forester showed me that if you take away, if you scrape the bark, then you see these clear hazelwood. And so you can sell for, I don't know how much money, instead of just a few euros. This is again the hazelwood. Yeah, next one. There are also some studies on the hazelwood. You see indented rings, hazel growth of lower spruce, reduce anisotropy of mechanical properties. So there are several studies also in acoustic, but no really conclusive study. Yeah. Very interesting also this paper by my friend Simcha Leviadun and Ronnie Aloni, who tried to understand the physiology of, and they found that actually should be a reduction in hormones in this point of the cambium. But still, several other investigations would be really needed to understand how the hazelwood occurs to happen. Also interesting is that not all the trees in Paneveggio have hazelwood. And so they tried to plant seeds from trees with hazelwood somewhere else, and they didn't. So it's not pure genetical, and it's not pure environmental. It must be a combination, probably. Next one. Assessing the authenticity, provenance, and dating. Next one.
Your gloves.
Cross dating, I already told you. Next one, please. You know probably Dendrochronology from some studies in the Arctic about driftwood. So taking driftwood on Svalbard or on Iceland, Greenland, you can reconstruct where is the log coming from by cross-dating with chronologies around the Arctic Sea, in Siberia, in Alaska. And so you can say, oh yeah, this log should be coming from the Ob River or the Yenisei basin. And the same, yeah, this is again, well, cross-dating, yeah. And it was very important because we were able to reconstruct also streams, currents. Yeah, here again, a paper with Arctic driftwood. Next one. And again, next one. And the same can be done with violins, in the sense that if you are able to cross-date violins with chronologies around the Alps, you can assess, let's say, the provenance, the source of the wood. But it's not easy because obviously you need a lot of chronologies of all around the Alps. And they should also go back to the time of Stradivari, so 400 years, 500 years. That's not easy. Next one. So this is a very nice artwork showing that you can cross-date, but and obviously the double bass is easier than the violin. Why? Because you have more rings. you need at least 60, 70 rings in order to date an instrument. And obviously, a double bass is better, and cello is better than the viola and the violin. Yeah. Determining the wood origin, there is a big book, a handbook of materials for string musical instruments. Obviously, works of art are usually according to the style, according to the varnish, according to the appearance. They try scholars to say, oh, this is a Stradivari or this is not. But dendrochronology is probably the only non-destructive method which is able to say this is really at least coming from wood taken before or after Stradivari died. Obviously, we can't assess the year the violin was made, but we can say this is certainly not a Stradivari, because Stradivari died 1736, if I'm not wrong, or 37. Anyway, if my outermost ring, so the terminus post quem, is 1800, obviously this is not a Stradivari. That's all. And again, this is not something new. I just wrote a literature review because the first idea was here by Lotter, Moser, and Meyer in 1000. Wait, I don't remember, but must be 1940 or something like that, or 50. So it's a very, very old story. Very famous are also the works done by Klein, Peter Klein, again from Hamburg, from the school of Eckstein, and he was probably doing the most of the dating and then the provenancing of the violin. Unfortunately, the most used chronologies are only, you see here, 7. And these are in the ITRDB, which is the International Trading Data Bank, which is in Boulder, Colorado, with the NOAA. And you can go, even now, there are smartphones and you can go and download whatever you want. But the only good chronologies, old chronologies, Norway spruce chronologies, from the right positions are these 7. So you understand that it's not easy. And so what was done? Actually, there are some labs. This is a friend of mine, Mauro Bernabei, in northern Italy. He measured entire collections of violins, cellos, and so on. And now he has the Ringwood series of Stradivari or Amati or whatever, cello, controviolino, viola, violin, and so on. And then if you go now with the violin to Paolo, I have no idea if I can go to the ITRDB and take some chronologies, but I don't have chronologies of musical instruments. So I suggest you not to come to me, but to go to labs. There are 2, 3 specialized labs. They have thousands of chronologies and also musical instruments chronology. Next one, please. And in the past nights, I was almost not sleeping because I said, there must be interest by Sotheby's or Christie's. Tarisio is this auction house. And I should ask probably 1 million and ask if they are funding some research to have more chronologies, to understand where is the wood coming from, and so on. But I doubt that they will fund me so much. Next one. Oh, yeah. The Messiah is a typical story because the authenticity of the Stradivari violin of 1716, known as the Messiah, has long been disputed. And its controversial dating created intense confusion in the violin community regarding the reliability of Turing dating. And that's why, next one, why? Because Stradivari made a lot of violins, probably more than 1,000, we think. And also the Messiah was changing owners continuously, very, very often. And then obviously the risk to have not a fake, but let's say a copy, it's very, very high. Next one. And the Messiah was dated, well, it was attributed to Stradivari. But then a paper by Stuart Pollens in 1990s said that probably it was not a Stradivari. Then Henry Grissino-Meyer published another paper, and also John Topham and Derek McCormick saying, yes, this is a Stradivari. And then we wrote another paper later saying, yes, it is, because someone else said, no, it is not. So I was also, next one, I was also involved in these dating, controversial dating, just to say what dendrochronology can do and what dendrochronology cannot do. Next one. There was a booklet published, artisanal, well, homemade, completely nonsense, but it was published by people working at the, or teaching at the luthier school, very famous in Cremona. And then sometimes later, well, that was really a nonsense with statistical problems. And they were saying, this is not the Messiah. That's why we then wrote the other paper. Yeah. And I was contacted shortly after this paper was published by a lawyer in Venice, because the same guys who wrote this booklet, they sold a viola attributed to Gasparo da Salò for 250,000 euro to someone, a client. And the client, after a while, playing the viola, the friends, they say, well, are you sure that it is Gasparo da Salò? Because probably it's not. And so he went to the labs in Hamburg and London, and they dated and said, no, this is, no way, this is 1,800. So the value is 20,000 probably, not 250,000. And so he went to the court, and the judge left the viola redate. I was transporting by train in second class the viola to Rovereto, where it was dated, and I was, this is Milan, Milano Centrale. You can imagine I was carrying the viola. I didn't know it was only 20,000. Next one. And it was dated, and it was assessed, actually, that it was 1,800 viola. So obviously, the violins now are sold always with a dendrochronological dating, but it depends on who is doing the dating. And and also how many chronologies are available. And so it's not easy to assess the provenance and the authenticity of string instruments. But there are some papers. Micha Beuting, for example, he has a specialized dendro labor in Hamburg, and he has a lot of chronologies. He's also working together with Katarina Schufat in Ljubljana, a friend of mine, and this is something serious, so you can believe. But also, Micha Beuting obviously doesn't give the chronologies to Paolo because the lab should also earn some bread. So they don't give, yeah. And it is very important for musicians and art collectors to know how much confidence they can place in the dendrochronological dating of instruments. And that's why I published a paper in Science last September to try to clarify how it's possible to use dendrochronology to detect fraudulent art, but that some caveats should be also considered. And well, I already told you about the ITRDB and how important is the dating of entire collections. For the future, obviously, you should also think that when restoring a violin, I have now, for example, in my office, a small fragment of a viola. And so you can do also some DNA, mitochondrial DNA analysis. If you have mitochondrial DNA analysis also in the forest, then you can do some provenancing with that. Or otherwise, you can also do some C14 radiocarbon if you have a small piece. Other innovative, novel approaches could be also strontium isotopes, also oxygen, hydrogen, and carbon isotopes. DNA already said. And I tried to summarize all these story in a paper just published in Dendrochronology, together with Bruce Carson, who is a luthier in Cremona, and Wolfgang Talitz, who is a musician in the Berliner Philharmoniker, and then connoisseur, art connoisseur Malcolm Wiener. Next one. Yeah, I just wish to say that Cherubini Conservatory Collection in Florence is not my relative, although I claim that probably he's old, but he's a componist, Luigi Maria Cherubini, 1760, 1842. And also I want to say that I don't make money dating violin. I'm a dendrochronologist, as you introduced me, and I try to clarify what are the potentiality and what the limitations of our method. Thank you very much. If you have questions. Do you want probably to share?
So we're happy to take questions now. And I just want to note for the people in the room that online we have a whole bunch of violinists. We have April Chiriboga plays violin and happens to have a family violin from that is Italian from the mid 1700s. So her family is involved in wild speculation, she says, about that one. And we, yes, and we have Dr. Mark Schneider online, who is an amateur luthier and a retired wood scientist. We have a very interested audience. And so with that, questions from the room.
For the interest people, if they want, they can write me an email and I can send the papers.
Sure. So I'll start out with a question. This isn't a scientific question, it's just a curiosity question. But if the best Stradivari violins are given to the best violinists in the world to play, then it seems like it's going to seem like those are the best violins in the world. So is there a circularity around this use of these? That maybe that's a question.
That's right. Yeah, probably that's right. Also, I was told that obviously if you own Stradivari or Guarneri Gesù or whatever, many doors of the famous halls, music halls, they will open immediately. And if you arrive with a not so famous violin, it's more difficult. Certainly it is also prestige. And it's like a Maserati or a Tesla. But on the other hand, there must be also some reasons from the acoustic part. Did I bring the...
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that presentation. I'm wondering, what it seems like that paper that has recently come out, it's not just dendrochronologists or scientists, it's also musicians and artists. And how has that, do you think, advanced the science of, dendrochronology and working with different kinds of people with different expertise? And how did that maybe change the way that you thought about the benefits and applications of dendrochronology?
Thank you. Yeah, interesting question. Obviously, for me, for example, it was very, very interesting to work together with a luthier, with a musician, because I learned a lot. And I also didn't know about the circularity you were speaking about. So I learned a lot. It's not easy because also between the luthier and between the violin player, obviously they have different perspectives. So it's very interesting. To me, the most important thing is that the tenets of dendrochronology are followed and are really respected. Otherwise, you have people dating just to sell at a higher price. And that is something which is going against our profession. And as dendrochronologists, I just wanted to be sure to make it clear. Hi. I didn't recognize.
Yeah, thanks for that, Paolo. It was very interesting. I have a violin players at home, and I was just checking the violins a few weeks ago, and I noticed that I have a one Stradivari at home with all the labels that you were showing me, and it looks old, but I was about to quit my shop already, but then I was checking that there's so many fakes around and made in the 1800s and things like that. So just, I was mentioning those different studies that have been made, and is there like an app that you can use that if you take the photograph of the rings already, that you can do your own carbon dating? Or, I mean the dating? No.
I'm a pro-vax, but no app. So I don't like the app. I don't like the smartphone, and so. But I wouldn't recommend to use the app, because that's exactly the way that not everybody can apply the dendro. Should be a bit more difficult, I would say, and it's also dangerous. So
Thank you. I enjoyed the talk. I'm trying to figure out some way to take advantage of this. So what's the limit in creating a Stradivarius today? Presumably we have technology that is better than Stradivarius had, and so we can make a violin, but we don't have the wood. Is that the problem?
I don't know. Thank you. I don't know. First of all, I learned that basically the style of the violin is still unchanged since 400 years. So there must be probably the best design. The wood, we would have the wood. And I think it's a combination of carving technique and also the technology. I don't know if really helps. But there are several physical, acoustical studies, and they obviously they found some important factor like the F on the front, but let's say that is not yet reachable. Let's say the quality, if really it's not reachable, because there are also some people saying, no, you can make a better violin nowadays. Yeah, probably I repeat the question because he was saying that the idea would be to go and take old wood. Yes, well, we have the second largest tree-ring lab in Zurich, in Switzerland, and we have very often questions about wood, and we found an entire forest, 260 trees buried close to Zurich, and they are 13,000 years old. So they are of the 11,000 before Christ. And we were asked by luthiers to take this old, very old, because they believe that it should be sounding better. I don't know. Certainly, I don't know. Yeah. Not yet really the varnish. It was asked if the varnish can't be remade in the same way. No, because we don't know actually really the composition of the varnish. Yeah.
Could you describe the process? Now you have your Stradivarius, or ostensibly Stradivarius violin. How do you proceed to generate your
measurement?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a very good question because obviously we can't take a core from the Stradivari, but we can take pictures. You can also take X-ray density profiles, and you can also put the Stradivari on the measuring table as you have in your lab. And obviously, sometimes, for example, in the case of this viola, we took away the bridge, and also we removed the strings. And then you can, usually we date the front, because the front is made made of Norway spruce. The back is usually maple, archer, whatever. And so we remove it, then you can measure the rings, and the outermost ring is usually the most recent ring, which is the terminus post quem. So the violin was made after this year. because this year was still in the tree growing. But we don't know if it was made 20 years later, 40 years later, or by you 400 years later. We can't know.
So it's great. The questions in the room have answered several of the questions online, which included questions around varnish and color, multivariate assessment tools, different assessment tools for assessing acoustic properties. But there are a couple of different ones here. And I just wanted to note, this isn't only the acoustic properties of wood aren't only an issue for Italy. Of course, our highest value wood in BC, I believe, is the wood used to make soundboards for musical instruments. And I know that hybrids, there's one company that makes guitars that found that hybrids between Sitka and white spruce were our very best, made the very best soundboards for their guitars. And so they actually supported one of our PhD students, former PhD students, a bit to work on hybrid index to assess the hybrid nature of trees that they would buy, logs, that they would then buy the logs for making those. So we do have value in those as well.
Is it related to wood density? Probably.
In part, I believe that's true. But related to density, Richard Hamlin, who's a forest pathologist, I think you know Richard, he is interested, not surprisingly, in the decay fungus that can help make a modern violin sound like a Stradivari. So, is this being used?
This is used by Schwarze. I can send you a couple of papers he published. I have no idea actually how they. I have to say that, probably coming back to your question, it's very nice because I learned a lot, but there is still a lot I have to learn because, for example, also the acoustic properties, I am absolutely ignorant. I don't know.
Yeah, there's another question here from Terry Connors that's interesting about the ratios of the elastic properties in different fiber directions. And Terry says, I did a very little bit of that some years ago and observed differences in tone wood specimens used for contemporary guitars. And that also relates to the hazel, like how that hazel pattern might affect sound properties.
Absolutely, yes. But again, I have no idea. There is this book, textbook by Bukur Springer, which is very detailed also in reporting the literature we know on acoustic properties. And again, I'm happy also to send you some papers. If you just write me, I do my best to, but I'm sorry, but I don't have an answer to such questions. Very good, but bad answer.
We have quite a few knowledgeable people online, which is great. And Mehran Runia talks about some more footprints detectable via acoustic property comparisons and follow the color of sound from violin diversities of the acoustic properties. So I'm very curious about that, the color of sound. And that might be a question back to Mehran to answer online rather than you, but do you hear musicians talk about the color of sound? No. Relating maybe wave frequencies to, so Mehran, we're very curious about your.
Probably it's something related to the vibe.
Mm-hmm. Could be. Could be.
Yes, I'm here ready. If you want, I can make some definitions about color of sound.
Sure, go ahead.
Yes. Thank you for letting me to speak. I have already published a chapter in a reference module in material science and material engineering published with Elsevier in 2019. I recommend to start to read it. I have talked about the acoustical properties and vibration of the wood. Then after speaking about the radiation, about the acoustic converting efficiencies, about the damping properties of wood, and comparing them in different wood species, after that, I tried to define the color of sound or the timbre of the sound. I found that in different wood species, and also in one species in different pieces of wood, for example, in Norway spruce, you can find different footprints in different harmonics, in different modes of vibration of the plates of that species of wood, that this footprint can be used to find or comparing different pieces of wood. And you can find that which one is which violin would be true and which one would be fake or a high copy. Because the luthier, of course, would use the best pieces of wood in their violin making, I think. This is just a research project that we are continuing in, started from 10 years ago and is still in progress. Thank you for letting me to speak.
That's fascinating. It sounds too bad our dean left, because it sounds like we need to have somebody on the musicology of wood science here in our wood science department.
Yeah, well, there is plenty of papers, yeah, going in this direction, and there is what I was realizing is that there are very many different projects which are needed. One is certainly the acoustic, but also the historical search for papers in the archives, and also the chemical. So that's why it's really fascinating, because it's putting together tree rings, but also wood technology, and also chemistry and physics and art, which making really wonderful the violin dendrochronology.
So I think that's you have a very quick question. We have one more question. What was that? Okay, so you can ask Paolo. So I think that's a great note to end on. I think we've all just learned so much from your seminar, and there's so much interest. And this hybrid format has let all kinds of people join us today in your seminar. So thank you so much, Dr. Cherubini, and thanks to the audience.